Thank you all for being here. With a quorum of CAC members present in the room and virtually, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Project Connect Community Advisory Committee to order at 5:06 p.m. on November 13th, 2025 at the Austin Transit Partnership Office Room 129 at 203 Colorado Street. I'll start with the land acknowledgement as always, but before that, we should go to the roll call. So this is Chair Ishar. I am here. Vice Chair Summers.
Here.
Mr. Hendricks.
Present.
Mr. Garza.
Here.
Mr. Gorse.
Here.
Mr. Crossley.
Here.
Mr. Reed. Ms. Berry. And then, of course, we have Mr. Brooks in the room. Thank you very much. Again, with the quorum present, we can proceed to our land acknowledgement. We do not have Ms. Berry joining us today. She could not make it. So I will be reading the land acknowledgement on behalf of the CAC. To ground yourself before starting this meeting, it's important to talk about the history of this region. Long before it came to be known as Waterloo or Austin, this region has drawn people here for thousands of years, in part because of our waterways and the wealth of natural resources. This region has been home to the Tonkawa, the Coahuilteca, as well as the Comanche, Lipan Apache, Sana, Humanos, and many others I may not have named who were also caretakers of this land. I highlight this history because Native and Indigenous peoples are routinely erased from the conversation, referred to as having disappeared or having been conquered. Native and Indigenous people are still here and present in what we now call Austin. The pursuit of white land ownership, profit, and so-called progress has harmed Black, Indigenous, and people of color in this city. The effects of the legacy of settler colonialism, the theft of land, slavery, and genocide are still felt and present with us today. It's vital to keep this history in mind as you do this important work and to make a commitment to stop perpetuating the cycle of violence against Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Thank you all. This takes us to our looking at our agenda, and essentially, when you thinking from that perspective of what we have in front of us, of course, the first thing is the public comment. I'm unsure if somebody had signed up to speak. And I see we have one attendee who is a city staff member, but if we have someone online who wishes to join or speak to us today, you can raise your hand virtually and we can make sure that you have the ability to speak to us.
City staff.
Yes, and city staff members, of course, is welcome to comment as well. Not seeing any. If somebody comes up, please, staff, keep me appraised of that so I can figure that out. Our first item is approval of the previous CSC meeting minutes. I believe those had been shared in advance, so folks should have them. Does anybody have any questions or concerns or things that they would like us to consider in terms of changing them? Not seeing any. Is there any motion to go ahead and confirm these would be our October 9th, 2025 meeting minutes? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Summers. Do we have a second? I'll go ahead. Oh, Mr. Brooks, going ahead and seconding it. So we have a motion by Vice Chair Summers, seconded by Mr. Brooks, to approve the CAC meeting minutes from October 9th, 2025. All those in favor say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Thank you all. That passes unanimously. We do not have any action items today, but we do have a discussion item. So this is looking at the needs assessment for business during construction. And we have folks here to present to that. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right, I'm going to share from my screen. Okay, oops. All right, let's try this. All right, can everyone online see that affirmative? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Frances Jordan, and I joined ATP this year to kind of help support this effort of supporting businesses during light rail construction. And what I'm going to walk through is Jen Pine's going to come up and briefly talk about the light rail timeline. And then I'm going to dive into kind of what the needs assessment is, kind of talk about the Austin business community, discuss best practices for what other cities and agencies did around this idea of support for businesses during light rail construction. And then we'll talk about next steps about what ATP will be doing, how the CAC can engage and support this effort as well, and any questions that you all might have. Jen?
Thanks, Francis. Good evening, everybody. Again, I'm Jennifer Pine with Austin Transit Partnership. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of big picture orientation. We are still in the project development phase, very close to concluding our NEPA compliance work. I'm happy to say we're on track to conclude that next month. We are also in active solicitations to bring on some progressive design build teams next year, and that they will be advancing the design and getting us into and through final design as well as constructing the project. So we're still in a space where we're estimating construction activities could begin in 2027. So while it's not imminent, as far as kind of the work that we can do to support businesses before and during construction, we think it's probably never too soon to start. And so we want to get out there and be having these conversations so that we are ready when any sort of disruptive work might begin. So with that, I'm just going to turn it right back to Francis, who's been really leading the charge on our team working through this.
Thanks. All right. And so when we talk about a needs assessment for business support, so it's this idea that we're going to start having a dialogue and assessing the needs of local businesses and key stakeholders to identify the resources that are available and kind of figure out what businesses need. We don't want to just follow other programs and just kind of plop it down and make it what is here in Austin. It's this idea that we need to kind of understand. And so this input will help ATP identify the most useful ways to support businesses. And so that's what I'm going to walk through. And so like the background though, like the setting of this is that local businesses make Austin unique, right? So if we're talking about restaurants, retail, and unique stores, these are not just destinations in Austin. They are the lifeblood of neighborhoods and they help create economic vitality and all of those things. And so it creates a powerful sense of place. And we all know that cities thrive when there's a powerful sense of place. And so that happens in Austin through authenticity, right? So we're thinking about places that have local made goods and neighborhoods that feel very genuine. I think we have a lot of variety from high end to quirky thrift finds, right? So there's something for every taste and budget. If we think about accessibility, that's something that's really important about having concentrated walkable districts and bike-friendly streets. And then last, but definitely not least, thinking about how businesses are often community-oriented and they support events and causes and local artists. I mean, I think about the ice storms that we have gotten used to and how we see businesses and restaurants support the community and things such as that. And so the main goal, the idea that we want to kind of bring home is like, we want to keep Austin, Austin. And so that's why this needs assessment is really that first step, right? And so the other piece to that before we dive in a little bit deeper is this idea of supporting businesses during construction is that we know that the light rail is going to transform how we move around the city, right? There's going to be a frequent, reliable transit service in addition to what we already have. And the idea is that there'll be easy accesses to businesses along the rail line. So it's really important for people to be able to live and work nearby and increase foot traffic to the business community. And so it's important to support the businesses so that at the end, when we have this amazing light rail, that the businesses are there. And so we want to work together to support a strong and vibrant business community as the light rail continues to advance. And so we do think it's important to note that we already had heard some things in the public meetings in 2024 and 2025 and the continued conversations with stakeholders. And some of those concerns that we've already heard were, what are the construction disruptions and what about customer retention and consistent access to information, proper notice to allow businesses to plan, and then thinking about financial cushion to help with any disruptions. And so it's this idea that we want to continue listening to businesses, stakeholders, and community members to be able to build this support. And so, but before we kind of dive into some of the examples and some of the things that I think are really important, we want to make note about construction mitigation. I think some people are often familiar on construction projects. ATP is going to have contractor requirements for the progressive design build partner. And so that's going to include your vehicular and pedestrian access, your wayfinding and signage, your dust and noise control, and proactive communications about construction activities. I'm not going to really dive into those kind of things, but we want to just make sure you all understand those things will be happening. And it's important to note that not all sections of the alignment are going to be under construction all at once. And so that sequencing information isn't quite finalized, but when it is, that information will be released. Okay, so this idea of like, we've already started to do some of this research of looking at initiatives that have happened across the country and the services that they have provided. And so some of this range of services have looked like business consultation services, communication strategies, financial assistance, legal assistance, marketing support, and construction mitigation. And so what I'm going to walk through is some of these nationwide examples and kind of share what we've kind of gathered as we started to do research and things of that nature. And the idea is that while some of these programs have done really well, you know, we can't just pick them up and just plop them in Austin. And so that's kind of what this idea of the needs assessment is, to ask business owners, would this help you? Would it not help you? How can we tweak it to make it more fit the Austin community? And so I just want to, we're not going to walk through an example for all of these programs, but we just wanted to highlight some of the ones that we've really been able to dig in with and actually meet with some of the staff. And so Valley Metro in Phoenix, Arizona, Sound Transit in Seattle, Washington, Metro Transit in St. Paul, Minnesota, LAMTA. And what's really interesting, just to note, that Valley Metro and LAMTA have had more than one light rail program, and they've iterated. So we've been able to talk to them about how they learned and grew and changed some of their programs, which has been really helpful. And then Maryland Transit Administration, even though that's a state, they also have some interesting things to look at as well. And so we hope to play this video, but I can't make any promises. So looking at Valley Metro, and so just I want to slow down a second. So what I'm going to show is about 4 examples about what they did. And I think some of this idea is going out into the community and kind of getting feedback. And so Valley Metro had a program called the Small Business Financial Assistance Program, and it offered free business consulting services, promotional materials, and directional signage. And 362 of the business along the corridor participated in one or more of these programs. And they also, in their program, provided $1.6 million in grant funding to over 270 small businesses adjacent to the light rail construction. The Valley Metro program really focused on really small businesses. That was like their mission and goal. And so it's really interesting how they were able to do that. All right, I'm about to press play. I think my sound is not on. Hold on. I have to turn my sound on for this. Oh, I don't think this is gonna work. Is there no way to turn the sound? Oh. Okay. All right, another example that we had was from Sound Transit, and they had a business relations program. And one of the things that they did is they actually created a campaign. I think they created a campaign called Loyal to the Local. And so this was an effort where they actually had online videos, print ads, and social media. And they also offered digital marketing support for individual businesses, including Google My Business Optimization, SEO coaching, social media setup, and online campaign creation. And one of the things that's really good about this program, we've been able to look a lot at their resources, and this program occurred post-COVID. So they've actually had a lot of really good examples that have been really good, as there are several really good programs that happened before COVID. It's been really nice to get really good information and data from programs that occurred after. Another program, LA Metro actually had a couple different programs, so we wanted to highlight the Business Solutions Center because it highlights a couple different services that we haven't quite mentioned, right? So talking about business development services such as accounting management, access to financial capital, brand development, marketing, social media, long-term business planning. And something that's really important that we've heard from some of these programs is that some of the things that businesses need, they would need them whether there was construction or not. And so this idea that some businesses don't have time or the capital or the resources to do long-term business planning. So it was really, really helpful for them as a business, in addition to the fact that they were in a business that was located next to the light rail. And so I think that's really important, that this is really just overall supporting the businesses and the work that they do. And so their Business Solutions Center has referred over 300 businesses to resource providers, experts, economic development professionals throughout LA County. And the other thing I want to highlight when it's talking about resource providers, experts, and they provide some of these services from different ways. It could be a nonprofit, it could be education institution. So there's different partners that potentially could help provide some of these services. And the last example that we wanted to highlight, something that Maryland has done a really good job, is these business spotlights. While some of these businesses had activity already, they already had a base. One of the things that the program has able to do is to bring new people to some of these businesses by some of these business spotlights. So they have a really robust social media and website and directory of businesses adjacent to the alignment. It enhanced the visibility of the local businesses through, I think one of the things that was really cool was the YouTube, right? I know I'm not necessarily a big YouTube person, but I know a lot of people get all of their stuff from YouTube. So having different ways that it's not just like one particular way to kind of highlight these businesses. So they had a variety, not only just social media. And then just provides a resource bank of entities that deliver business support and development programs. And so those are just some of the examples that we wanted to kind of share with you of ideas that programs had done. And so the last piece I'll kind of walk through is the idea of how we're going to kind of work through this needs assessment and how the CAC can support that. So over the next 6 months or so, it's this idea of starting to meet with potential partners for services and resources. Community partnerships and collaboration will play a key role in how we can potentially deliver these services. So some of this is understanding what is available in the Austin community. Then we're going to be doing focus groups, whether that's with business owners, local organizations, and community members that will give input regarding priorities. We're going to be doing a business focus group. We'll really be able to kind of dig in and hear from businesses and business organizations. But we also hope to have an opportunity to listen to community members, neighborhood residents, think about like, what would make you want to go during construction? I think it's often, some people will go to their favorite restaurant no matter what's happening, but also seeing how people show up in the world and will support these businesses through construction. One of the really important pieces is business block walking. Staff will walk the corridor to ensure that contact is made with every business as much as possible. You know, one of the things that's super important is that we appreciate our businesses and our involved stakeholders who who we hear from, but sometimes, not everyone is able to make meetings or focus groups or things of that nature. So it's this idea that we have to kind of go where the people are, where the businesses are. So it's our intention to actually walk the corridor to try to make sure we're hearing from all businesses. And especially because of that diversity and the variety of businesses along the alignment, it's really important to make sure that we can hear from all of the businesses if possible. And in that effort, we'll also be having a survey distribution, right? So that we're trying to make sure that we have as much information and data in terms of understanding what businesses want and, making sure we have their proper information. And so after all of these activities, the idea is that we would have a completed needs assessment. And so I'll end here. I think there's some support to the CAC, unless there's other ideas that maybe have popped in you all's head as I've walk through some of this, is this idea that we want to spread the word of the work that we're doing, and we want to make sure people are aware. We also want, if they're connect ATP to potential partners and opportunities. We've already started to develop a potential list, but we're definitely open for things maybe that we hadn't thought of. And then recommend participants for our focus groups. And so I've said a lot, and at the first part, I was saying it very quickly. Jen, did you want to add anything before we let people dive in with any questions, comments?
Did you want to add anything?
I'm sorry, no, I'd love to hear questions and we can go from there.
Appreciate it. We'll open it up to question. Thank you, Ms. Jordan. We'll open it up to questions. And maybe if you can help me and not stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody, make sure. And folks, if we don't see you or acknowledge you online, just raise your hand or just unmute yourself and start speaking. So I'll open it up to questions for folks.
I think that was a question.
Ms. Summers, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. So the focus is on local businesses, right? So I'm curious how that's kind of defined. If there's a Starbucks, or HEB, those are not, how you interpret that, business or local business or not could vary by, I might have a different answer than somebody else has an answer to that. So could you describe what types of businesses qualify?
Well, eligibility is a part of ultimately what would be a part of a program that we create. And so that stuff hasn't been established yet. But one thing I do know is that in Texas, there is this idea of chain and a local business, that's one piece, right? And so there is a category in, business data that comes from the Secretary of State. And so that is one way to characterize it. But I think that is something that we're looking into and how we define it, and getting input about what we consider local is something that's really important in the needs assessment.
I would add too, something that the team has done, and you just touched on it just a little bit, is we've collected quite a bit of data about what businesses are along the corridor right now, size, revenue, where there are franchises versus true chains and that sort of thing. So we do have quite a bit of data there. But I think that's part of the program development, is how do we define kind of some of the eligibility criteria.
I have one more. This is more of a comment, but I know one of the things that arose when a bit earlier when we were doing some notifications to property owners whose buildings might be affected or need to be demolished or altered in some way due to the construction and design plan, that in that case, we were contacting the property owners. And there was some news in the community at that time that in some cases, the property owners had not informed their tenants who were local businesses. And so when the local businesses found out through a journalist, they were surprised about that. Obviously, that's a little bit different problem. It's more about the structures. But I guess one of the things, and I've also heard it expressed in other venues, is what happens with, obviously all these local businesses are located. Some may own their property, some may not. So how are those kind of concerns between landlords and tenants, that local business tenants, how is that managed by your team?
That one. So, and I would view them as they're different things, where we're talking to property owners about places along the corridor where there is some kind of property acquisition anticipated. You're right. When the draft EIS was issued, we reached out to all of those potential property owners. And you're also correct in some cases anyway, those properties did have tenants that were businesses. And in many, perhaps all cases, the property owner requested the ability to be the one to communicate with their tenants. And so that is, property acquisition and associated relocations, which is actually like a relatively small number of properties and businesses. In this case, with looking at how can we support businesses along the corridor, we're talking about the thousands or whatever the number is that they're not going to be relocated. They're there and we want to be able to support them. And so in that case with block walking, for example, yes, we're going to be talking to tenants in that case. It's also a different topic.
Yeah, and I will add to that is that, getting property owner data is actually easier. And so we have discussed of making sure property owners know, but at the end of the day, it really is, we're dealing with the businesses. And because to your point, the information is like some places have information, some don't. So that's why we would have to do some of the block walking as much as we can to make sure that there is a really good understanding. One thing I will note is that some of the programs that we've looked at, that's one of the things that they've really informed about is that close relationships between having people really know the businesses and having an open relationship and a dialogue. And so I think that's this idea that versus when it's like kind of what Jen's talking about, a completely different effort where it's like almost like it's like a shared, where this is a little bit of a different kind of relationship.
For a business that was a tenant that might be displaced, I know it's a small number, as you acknowledged. Would they through this program, could they be eligible for relocation assistance or something of that nature? No.
I'm sorry. Let me ask a clarifying
would
question.
they receive it? Could they potentially it's a business that's a tenant, and it is one of the locations that's going to be a site for property acquisition. Would that business that's going to get displaced from their the space they're renting be eligible for assistance in relocating?
So in the case where there's a property acquisition and an associated, relocation, yes, like we provide relocation assistance, we would have a full relocation plan, and we're, happy to provide kind of all that entails. And so, yes, and that is guided by the Uniform Act as well. So, yes, we would not be planning, any kind of, relocation for businesses, obviously, that aren't associated with those properties, but would want to support them by driving customers, especially during construction, and providing other kind of services and resources that might help them out.
Great. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, this is also different. So right now, the thing that we're putting together is happening down the road. And so some of what you're talking about is going to have happened before all of that, right? So that's why we're just doing the needs assessment right now, right? We're not starting the program, right? We're trying to get information to ultimately understand what the support would look like in the future. Does that make sense?
I'm sure other folks have questions. One thing I'll just ask, just to sort of clarify, and Mr. Crossley, we'll come to you next. Just so that I think everybody is clear on this, right? So if there's direct property impact, that will be handled under a relocation process, which ATP will be handling.
Yes. And just to make sure I'm confirming, yes, if there is a relocation associated with a property acquisition, ATP would be handling that in accordance with the Uniform Act. And yes.
And then what we're talking about is something that is not required by law, but is separate in assessing that there's construction impacts on businesses, and how do we sort of manage that?
Absolutely. Yes. It's, I guess you could call it discretionary if that's what you're getting. We're not required to do this. We're not required to do any certain things. This is something that we want to tailor for this community.
That's helpful. And I just want to clarify that, just because, I'm thinking residential displacement, which is what I'm more familiar with, right? There's the direct displacement impact that will be handled as regularly. And then there's the induced sort of flow over issues that can occur because of construction. And that's what we're talking about here. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody's sake.
Thank you.
Mr. Crossley, we'll turn to you.
Okay, thanks. I think I have two questions. So the first one is about like multimodal access to businesses, sort of with like temporary changes happening and permanent changes happening, and just thinking about how like some of that is going to be our traffic patterns are going to change, and there's going to be places where there's going to be traffic or problems. But then there's also, temporary pedestrian sidewalks, and then also bus stops will probably move and stuff. And so I wonder if there could be some thought about like a single point of contact for each business that kind of works with Austin Transportation Department, with ATP and Pet Metro and TxDOT on those kind of like knowing what's going to happen around you with traffic and sidewalks and everything. So that's just a suggestion of like, from the business owner's point of view, they don't have to talk to all those agencies, but somebody will kind of help them navigate. And then the question is, I think I've mentioned that way back in a different life in 2006, I lived through the construction of the Purple and Green Line in Houston and was in a nonprofit advocacy and did a bunch of reports on business mitigation of business interruptions during construction of light rail. So I just finally found all those reports, and I can email them to everybody, and they may be out of date, but just happy to send all that if it can help. And it made me think about one thing that happened in Houston was that the nonprofit LISC Houston, which is like the Local Initiative Support Corporation, worked on the complete communities type projects. And some of that involved banks, like private banks, setting up loan programs for small businesses. And I think the private banks get kind of like certain community development block grant credits and things. And the idea was that like, while construction is happening on your block, you expand your restaurant and add another floor. And so I want to encourage sort of incentives for private entities to get in on this and help, and also nonprofits to help and like go beyond what the public entities can do. So,
Yes.
yeah, so that's my suggestions and or questions. I don't know if they're questions.
Can I just respond to that too? Because I love all that. I think it's great. And I think we're aligned with the vision that we need to staff this so that businesses or, other stakeholders along the corridor, they've got a number, they have a person, they know what that person looks like, and they can call them. And, that we really are known and easily accessed. Like, we love that vision that you've described. So, and I appreciate what you're saying about LISC too. And I know Francis has a list of potential partners that we're going to be engaging with, and just try to leverage marshal all the forces that we can towards the cause.
Other folks with questions? I think while we're waiting on folks, I had a bunch. I guess I'll just start with one. I guess that's a separate piece, which I think came up in a comment from one of our attendees as well. Again, I talked about like two separate pieces, but then beyond that, there will also be some kind of communication on construction closures and what does that look like, right? Again, do you want to speak into the microphone just so that folks online can hear that as well?
Sure, I would love to. And that it's related to, as our progressive design builder teams come on board next year, they're going to be obviously very engaged in that effort. And so a principle that we are highlighting as we bring these teams on board and are confirming their scopes is this proactive communication. On the one end, let's say if there's going to be some detours on a street or whatever the item might be, that we have guidelines for proactive communication and getting it out, but also responsiveness. If there is some, issue that occurs, to be highly responsible there. So we're going to be very, very much collaborating with and also relying on our contractors for that kind of proactive communication during construction. I do think that's really important for people to know what's happening, when it's happening, and be able to ask questions about that or identify issues sometimes. One thing that we're kind of piloting right now is how we are collecting additional information about delivery patterns, for example. That is going to be a topic throughout the entire project corridor, how those work, and so that we're coordinated at an individual business level on how that works for them during construction, but also as far as the permanent condition after light rail is operating.
I appreciate that. One other question I had was, actually, I'll go to the other question first, which is most of the examples that we're seeing, are these fully being funded by the transit agencies? Are there sort of city philanthropic partnerships? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I won't go into, I'll just kind of do a high level, is that it's all different. So agencies did it differently. So some had collaboratives where it was heavily funded by nonprofits and private entities and private individual donors. It was kind of like a partnership between the agency, the city that was there, and they actually were able to leverage funds, something not to get too in the weeds, but like there's financial institutions that can, if there's like seed money, then they're able to kind of fund that. So some of the work is funded by outside entities that aren't a part of the agencies. And then some agencies, I think I'll let Jen speak to kind of what the agency specifically did, but a lot of these none of these programs really were solely funded by the agencies. And so I'll let you talk about what agencies can do.
Yeah. And part of that is the nature of our funding, right? You know, whether it's local taxpayer funds or the federal funds, in particular with like the direct federal assistance and loans and that sort of thing is where we have some limitations on how those particular dollars could be used. So in some cases, the city provided donations, or it was nonprofits, or there was grant funding. And we can be a convener to kind of bring these things together to have resources accessible to businesses in a way that is as easy for them as we can manage.
And I think the other thing why the needs assessment is really, really important is because programs did different things based on what they wanted to do. So in some of these programs, like I know this might not seem like a lot, when they were focusing on small businesses, you know, direct financial assistance in terms of actual dollars didn't matter. But in some of these programs, loans actually did make a difference, right? Because $9,000 really wasn't enough for rent and utilities. So having zero interest loans really were important. And that's a completely different program. So I think the reason that we are initiating a needs assessment is because we really want to understand from businesses what they need versus, to our point, is just like, we did some research about some programs and we're going to, here's this thing. And so I think the needs assessment is really, and also you got to think about the alignment, and the corridors aren't all the same. And so I think one thing that Phoenix has done is that they haven't actually done exactly the same thing on all of their corridors. And so I think that's why we really want to do the needs assessment, to really understand and not just make assumptions or a one size fits all.
I definitely appreciate that. And it makes sense, right? We want to leverage our dollars, spread them out. And frankly, I don't expect my transit agency or transit construction agency to be a small business incubator. That's not in-house skills that I would imagine folks in this building have, where there's folks in the community who really know how to do that work, and that's what they do day in, day out. The other thing I was just gonna mention was, well, one, I want to take a comment, which is, right, also looking at how do we sort of assist local businesses, not just initially, but track, you know, what is foot traffic and what do the impacts look like over time to the, not the lifetime of the project, but at least in the construction phase that impacts them directly, right? I think sort of tracking that. I didn't want to acknowledge that had come up. The other thing, and I think this is a funding piece that has come up on the CAC before, which is at least the Uniform Relocation Act and other federal funding, there's limitations on providing assistance to undocumented folks. So I guess as part of the analysis, what would be helpful to understand is whether it's philanthropic dollars or other dollars, is there a way for us to ensure that if by chance someone does have a food truck and they're undocumented, that we're able to provide support for them, even though the federal dollars cannot be utilized for that. It's just, that is important. I think it's a value for us as a community. We want to make sure that that's something we're thinking of, particularly in the Riverside corridor, where we know we have a diverse group of people and amazing businesses. So just, you know, as you're doing the needs assessment, it might be worthwhile to just think about that. And I bring that up to say, you know, we've talked about this separately for the uniform relocation long has the CAC sort of anti-displacement working group talked about, is there a way for us to use the anti-displacement dollars to fill that gap, right? Would rather make sure that everybody is fairly being treated and served, regardless of their status or whatever. And there's resources, if those can be leveraged, again, staying within the law, whatever can be done for that perspective. Other folks with questions? Oh, sorry, Mr. Brooks, go.
Is the name People Fund at all familiar? Okay,
They are on our list.
okay. And off
And-
mic.
I wanted to just comment, thank you for bringing up undocumented. I do, that is something that has been already mentioned to us. And so it is on our list of things to look into and just at least have, have an understanding and an answer for that question. So thank you.
Of course. Other folks with questions? I know I have two more, but I'll open it up.
I've got one. Does
Go ahead.
business interruption insurance cover public projects interruption? I have no idea.
I don't know that. Could you say that again? It's public interruption.
So sorry, business interruption insurance, like a typical insurance that like a operating business might have, and I think it's typically more for like fires and internal construction delays. But I was just kind of curious if like external impacts would also be covered. Because there might be, if it does, which I'm guessing it probably doesn't, but if it does, there might be an education factor on asking for specific riders or something along those lines to business operators along the corridors.
Thank you. I don't know the answer and we can look into
Mm.
that.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Other folks with questions? If not, I'll just quickly ask two more. One was, I don't know if y'all have this, you can share this separately as well. Does Valley Metro have data on what those mini grants, like what kind of things folks utilize them for? That would just be,
So some of these programs, and I think I brought this with me, but I can't make any promises, is that they decided what people could spend the money on, right? So I can just generally, a lot of the programs that gave the most money, they were very like strict on kind of what you could spend it on. And the places that gave like smaller amounts of money, they were more like, as long as it's kind of in these areas. And so that's what we're talking about. After we've kind of done the needs assessment, we also can kind of look at that in a little bit more detail, but they do have information about what they allowed funds to be used for and such. And also, I think something that's really important to think about too is that it's like the idea that some businesses don't necessarily need financial assistance too. And like you could provide more resources for your business consultation, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that's the other thing to think about is that this program will kind of also think about that area as well.
I appreciate that. And then I think honestly, the CSC, yes, please share the information with us whenever we can push it out. I guess my last question then is around timeline. Like what does the timeline of the putting out the needs assessment look like? If there's like a time period in which we should keep our eyes open for any communication, make sure we're sharing it.
I think, in the beginning of the year, we're kind of kicking off some of the activities that we mentioned on the list. And so we were able to, I can provide that to Giannis, who can share it out with you all and on the ways that you all can engage specifically. But I feel like you all have already kind of like some of the suggestions that you all are thinking of. I think after this meeting, if there's more opportunity, if you all think of organizations for us to engage in, if you all think of other ideas, I think Jay gave us some really good ideas to think about as well. So just continue to share that information. But I do think if there are business owners or business organizations like in the particular parts of the alignment, they might already be on our list. But if there's any suggestions, I think we could go ahead and take any of those suggestions. So feel free to send that to Giannis or Sophie.
Yeah, and I would add, I think especially we're looking to convene focus groups because that's been a very effective tool for us to have a little bit of a deep dive conversation on topics that warrant it. And we know business owners are busy running their businesses. So if you have a suggestion, so we think that that's going to be a little bit of a challenge that we're working through. But if you have a suggestion of a business owner or a person who should be involved, who you think would contribute time to something like that, we would love to know. We'd be happy to reach out.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Ms. Summers.
This is, I guess, a comment or idea, but I mean, one benefit through two of the crucial areas, there's some merchant associations, like through the university area partners at Congress, South Congress. But one of the things that strikes me, and that seems, I don't know that much about other cities, but that's like part of our serious flavor, I think, in Austin, is that we have that. I don't know if other cities have that in the same way we do, but it also strikes me that now we could pitch this to them and you're asking them what they want, but it also strikes me that some of the other parts of the corridor, like Riverside, if there's a merchants association in Riverside, I'm certainly not aware of it. So maybe that's something to look at, fostering those kind of alliances in other places along the corridor. Cause I know that from a lot of experience that those, the ones that exist now, are powerful advocates, for their businesses and community. And so just highlighting that, that's a benefit that you can rely on, but not every part of the corridor has that. So just a thought there.
It's really good.
Any last questions, folks? If not, thank you so much, both of you, Ms. Pine, Ms. Jordan. Thank you both so much. Committee members, this takes us into our staff updates. We'll start with ADP. I don't know, Mr. Banks, if there's any updates from the ADP side. While we're waiting, Ms. Ortiz, I see you online. I don't know if you had any updates from the Cap Metro side.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So right now, Cap Metro, we are planning on proposing the fare box replacement on buses, which just means that we won't be able to print day passes on the bus, but that they'll still be available through the UMO app and as well as reloadable fare cards. But right now that is open and you can definitely learn more about it through our website. I can definitely share that here as well. And then please feel free to reach out with any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ortiz. From the city side, do we have any updates? Not seeing any. And then ATP staff.
I know I have one, and Jen, I don't know if you have any more, but I know there was this, your CAC is invited to a community service award ceremony and reception to recognize the Project Connect Community Advisory Committee. This will be on December 16th. So mark your calendars. There will be an electronic notice sent out to y'all, but wanted to make sure you are aware now that December 16th, which is a Tuesday, from 3 to 4 p.m. here at ATP. They will serve as an opportunity to recognize the dedicated service to the Austin community by the members of the CAC committee. Service awards will be presented on behalf of the 3 partners, and a reception will follow afterwards. So I think if you think back to a few years ago, we did something similar where we had some awards we gave out to y'all as well. Jen, I don't know if you have anything.
I'd be happy to elaborate for just a minute on a couple things that we mentioned in the intro to our presentation. But we are on the cusp of concluding the NEPA process. And so I like to speak about that as it has been a process. It started in January 2024. And, with a public process, we came back a year later in January of this year with the draft environmental impact statement and conducted a public review and comment period. And so we've prepared the final environmental impact statement in collaboration with the Federal Transit Administration. And we're on track to release that next month. We are actively working with FTA right now on their legal review. So If you recall, the draft EIS identified a number of recommendations with regard to the design options. So we're carrying forward all of those recommendations. I think we spoke about this at a prior CAC meeting, but we also will be showing some design refinements that are positive in the sense that we've been able to identify some reduced property needs in some locations. And so we'll be excited to release that. Again, still on track for next month. And with the government shutdown ending, it gives me even more hope that we will meet that. So the other big item really is on the procurement side. And I mentioned we do have 2 active solicitations for progressive design build teams. One team would be to design and build really the most of the light rail throughout the corridor, all the civil work, the stations, the systems, and then separately a contract to build the operations and maintenance facility. So we should have some selections and be awarding contracts for those next year. We also issued our vehicles procurement not that long ago, a few weeks ago. And so that is they have a while to prepare that. So those proposals will be due in the new year as well. And so there are going to be a lot of big selections next year. And I think it's exciting because it's really advancing, we're bringing the people on board who are going to really bring it to life and build it. So we are excited about that.
Thank you, Ms. Pine. Go ahead. Mr. Brooks, can you please turn on the microphone and repeat your question?
Is the vehicle procurement, is it just an RFQ at this point, or is it an actual RFP?
It's a request for proposal. So it's a 1-step. And for the progressive design build solicitations, those were both 2-step, meaning we issued a request for qualifications and firms had to be qualified to proceed to step 2, which was the proposals. But in the case of the vehicles contract, that's not the case. It's just 1 step.
I wanted to know, which has become a very interesting question, whether provision is made for carrying bicycles on the train cars. Would that vehicle procurement document be the right place to look?
Ed, I'm happy to follow up on that one for you because I think that what you're looking for would be in the vehicle spec, which would be part of the procurement, but I'm happy to follow up on that. That question of where and how and what are the specifications for bicycles on
Not the only one who's interested.
Yes. And I will say this, though, our spec is not probably super prescriptive, meaning it's not going to say there has to be room for 8 bicycles on this train. But I'm happy to get the exact language and come back here on that topic.
Thank you.
And then just real quick, as far as, of course, we went through the process for the CAC new members. I think we're waiting for a memo, and Justin can correct me or make sure I'm saying it right, but I think we're waiting for a memo for the city to make sure they've seen the memo for the update before we announce who are going to be the new CAC members or who's going to be on the CAC. So we're waiting for the city to do that, and we'll be able to announce, I guess, sometime shortly once we're sure that they've seen the memo.
Thank you so much, Mr. Banks. And I do want to acknowledge Ms. Berry has joined us as well for the question of sort of quorum and looking at our roll call. Our next item is working group updates. I don't know if other working groups have any updates. The working groups that I'm associated with, we have not been able to do any business within the past month, so nothing new to update. The anti-displacement working group is going to be meeting soon to talk a little bit about next steps. But I'm turning it over to see if any other a committee member has an update.
The ETOD working group met, and I'm looking at the other people in that group to help me because I've just come out of registration at UT and I'm just like blanking on why did I even start saying it, but we did meet. We met with the City of Austin Planning Department, sort of talking about their next phase of recommendations and planning. JD, can you recap that better than what I did, or Mike? Yeah. So we are doing things. Anyway.
Are we scheduled to meet again next month? So this is an ongoing.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to, because they're going to come out with more sets of recommendations about community benefits and like that phase 2 that we've been kind of working toward. And we talked about some of the changes in state law that could affect that process as well. So.
Y'all, and just to let y'all know from an agenda perspective, we have heard from that team that they might be coming to us in January or February. So they'll be coming to the full CAC. Well, I'm glad the working group is meeting, but I know they were waiting on some more progress to come back to the full CAC. But that is on our list of items. Any other updates? If not, I'm going to go to future meetings and agenda items. One thing I'm just going to quickly mention, and I would love to get a pulse from the group, is we, as you've noticed, the past 2 months, we've had sort of lighter agendas than usual, partially because we're waiting on a bunch of the sort of things that are in the queue to come early next year. As far as we're aware at this moment, we don't have any time-sensitive item that needs to be taken care of in December. I'm just opening it up to see, would any committee member have a concern if we do not have that item? I'm not making that certain yet, so don't take it off your agenda. I'll send you a cancellation notice, but does anybody have any concern if we cancel the December meeting? And so, okay, I'm not seeing any concern. What we will do is that I will mention is exactly that event on the 16th. So hopefully that can take place instead of your time commitment. I would love if folks can be there. Particularly, we have several committee members who are actually rolling off. And, Mr. Hendricks, I'm looking at you right now, and others. We do want to just honor and thank you all. If we're not going to have a December meeting, at least at that event, to be able to thank you all for your years of service and involvement and supporting us in that amazing work. So that would be the thing that I would still want to be able to celebrate our committee members, and we'll be able to do that on the 16th if we don't have a meeting. Yes, Mr. Crossley.
Is it like, I guess the staff have contacts for all the previous members of CAC, and can we invite them for that party?
Yes. So, Mr. Crossley, that is already on the agenda to have those folks join us. And sadly, we've had several folks leave town. They're no longer in Austin. I know it's surprising. We've had 3 people leave town, which is, I think, quite big. But having said that, we want to invite those folks because, again, I think this is, to that point, we did this a few years ago when we had a big inflection point and change in committee members. We're having that again. We do really just want to celebrate all of the committee members, including, honestly, former ones. But thank you for that reminder.
Chair Azar,
Yes.
I remembered something I wanted to say about the ETOD group. I think it's important. I'm sorry about that update, but one of the big things the city team is working on is planning for East Riverside corridor and anti-displacement ETOD strategies for there. And that was like probably the biggest, and that's important to say aloud. So I wanted to say that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sowers. Any other requests for future agenda items from our committee members? And again, there's several in the queue that we're getting to slowly. Yes, Mr. Brooks.
Council recently passed, I think it's called the Austin Opportunity Fund. Can we have somebody who's knowledgeable do a presentation on that?
Yes, we'll definitely put that in the queue and hopefully make a note of it, and we'll work with our city partners to have someone come and talk about that. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And I honestly have no idea about it, so be good to know.
I think that these, but definitely I'm forgetting the name of the report, but the one that determines how we get bus stop shelters, and we've talked about that from Cap Metro, and then the strategic housing blueprint. Those are 2 that I think have been, I know they're on the list, but I think that they're bubbling up. I also think there's about something that might be interesting is there's the City of Austin program on the transit enhancement. I think that they are working on some updates that I think there's a report coming out jointly with Cap Metro that might be interesting to hear about as well.
So service standards is definitely on our agenda. It's probably going to be early next year, partially because our Cap Metro planning team was doing so many other items. We were giving them a break to bring them back. And then, yeah, I did not realize that the city was looking at updating those guidelines, so we can look at that as well. Any other items? Well, before we adjourn, I do just want to acknowledge, Mr. Reed is not here. I do want to thank him for his service. Mr. Hendricks, you're here. And I just wanted to see if you give you an opportunity, if you just wanted to say a few words. And I just want to personally just really thank you for you've been there since the start of the CAC. You've been an amazing member. You've really reminded us of the importance of, making sure that we're taking care of our workers and labor and bringing in all those important conversations and working really hard. So I just want to, one, acknowledge all of your service, but also give you a moment and thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to serve on this committee and appreciate everyone's hard work and folks will be soldiering on with this good work. Don't forget about the workers because, of course, I've been on it from the beginning, but we really haven't started building yet. And I want to make sure that we keep focused on not just the businesses, which I think was an important conversation tonight, but the folks that will actually be doing the hard work and putting this on the ground. So thank you for everything. And I look forward to seeing you all on the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks. And hopefully you'll still keep on reminding us and coming and talking to us of anything that you think is important.
And hopefully I'll be in a different position to advocate for y'all down the road.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hendricks.
Thanks.
Okay, not hearing otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the Community Advisory Committee at 7 p.m. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And happy holidays.